again. We're back, and this is the start of Halloween month. So the Western films, I'm pretty much going towards horror this month. I'm trying to do different ones each week that are variations on horror. So for me, horror is just a genre that you can do a lot of stuff with. So I'm trying to give a lot of different kind of movies some spotlight. So I'm trying to lean into Halloween month, but also not lean into it in a boring way of let's do my favourite Halloween movies from the Halloween series or something like that. I've done a video, the 2 days video of James that's just up on my channel, which covers Halloween recommendations, which were meant to do last year, and it went to hell because of the pandemic. So we've done that. The rest of this will be more in depth, really. The first one is a new film, but after that, the films are a lot older. So I'm not going to be that worried with spoilers really beyond the first one. The first one, there are going to be no spoilers. After that, these films are over a decade old. You're on your own. You should have seen them by now if you like this genre. That's the way I'm taking it. But there's no real point. I don't think I've even been spoiling that much, really, ultimately. Okay, the first one, the new one, is Candyman 2021, which is an interesting film. Not entirely successful, but interesting. It's better than Candyman 2, but not in the same league as the first one. The first one by Bernard Rose is a really terrific film, very scary, and it's a film that changes gear halfway through. So it starts off as one movie, which is a urban legend movie, and it turns into a movie about psychosis and craziness and how your imagination can run riot, and white guilt about the past of what we've done can go crazy in someone who might be a bit disturbed. You know, it's this whole idea about it's about race, but it's about race from made by a white guy, so it's about white guilt ultimately, as well as guilt of the past, and as well as your craziness and your feel of entitlement and things like that. That some people who are academics who actually have an easy life tend to suffer from. People in real life who have to make a living probably don't care as much about that stuff, but people who might be a bit more into the academic side of things worry about that kind of stuff. This one's about that, what happens when what was underclass, which was the black population of Chicago, is now becoming the middle classes. We're trying to get into that kind of world, but you're still dealing with the after effects of racism, but you're now kind of the entitled people as well. You're now the people who are making good livings off everyone's pretensions, everyone of that world. So it looks like what happens with the art world, where urban experience can now be sold as art and you can get paid a lot of money for it. We have now joined, if you were the underclass, you've now joined the overclass, and you're now one of them, basically. And what does that do to you? Does it drive you mad, or do you just accept it? And it's about the idea of what happens, like, what the traumas that are still hidden deep, even if you've moved from one class to the other. And this idea of a change in America, because what in the 90s was still basically white had most of the money. Some black people had money, but most of it was white. Now it's like there's a much more of a wide range of people with money. But some of the problems are still there, but people now have money and they are kind of moving up in the world to be in the higher classes, and they want to protect their space as much as everyone else. So it's the complications of time passing, but also some old wounds are still there. So it's kind of a metaphor for the experience of black people in America through a horror movie. And it's made, Jordan Peele wrote and produced it, Nia DaCosta directed it and also co-wrote it. And it's a very good movie about that. The problem with the film is that some of these things I've talked about aren't explored as much as I would like to see them explored. It feels like it has to keep on going back to a horror movie in a way that Bela Lugosi's film never really felt it needed to do. Like, in the original Candyman, the horror was always entwined with the story and the madness, and you felt like everything was going the same direction and interacting in interesting ways. And this one, it feels a bit clunkier. And sometimes things are kind of shoved in ways like, we need a horror sequence now. But as the film goes on, it's a weird thing is, I think the last 20 minutes either love the last 20 minutes I did, or the last 20 minutes is too far. Where I think it goes into melodrama a bit more, it goes into weird plot dynamics, which either work for you or they don't. For me, they worked. It was like a melodramatic idea of the past is still there. I mean, you may be able to ignore it, you may be able to have forgotten about it, but it's still there. And it will affect you in ways, and it will cause problems, and a lot of old grudges are still there, despite the fact you may have money, and they haven't been fully solved, and that's a more powerful thing. Getting there sometimes is weird, because your lead character is starting to become affected by the Candyman myth, and be affected by it, his art's been affected by it, and it becomes a physical and mental infection. And it's but we've seen it before though. We've seen it before in the first film, and this time it's like from the person from the outside coming in. This time it's a person who feels an outsider is now going up in the world, and he's still been infected by the past and the traumas of the past. And it's how the traumas of the past move into the new generation. How do they change? And the idea of the Candyman is something that it's a myth that changes through the retellings of different people. So there's more than one Candyman ultimately. And that's the idea that comes through the entire film. So that's not a spoiler, that's something that floats through the film. And it's a really interesting idea, but it's just not done. It's not scripted as well. This is the middle section. It starts well and it feels the middle section gets a bit clunky with some of the developments. And then it finds its footing again and goes to an interesting end. But it's just a problem there in the middle. Feels like they need another draft or two just to finesse the last few bits it needed. But it's still a good film. It's well directed. That's the big thing, is the camera placement, the shots, use of actors, all that stuff works. I mean, the director, Nia DaCosta, has a really good eye, is really good with actors, it's really good with mood. It's just that she's working with a script shaped right that had some problems in the middle. That really needed a little bit more finesse in the middle, just needed a bit more work. It just feels like it was 1-2 drafts away from being finished. Like, it just felt like it moved into production just before it'd gotten the last few bumps out the script. Because in the middle it just feels like there's a scene or two missing that... It feels like there's a scene missing that should have been like the metaphorical scene in the middle of the film that would have played out the ideas of what it was grappling with the people who were oppressed and coming to the middle classes. I feel there's some sort of horror scene that you need a metaphor for that wasn't there. But that's just my opinion. It's still a good film. I still recommend it. But you might have problems with it. It's not a perfect film, but it is a really interesting film. It is a good sequel. It's just not quite the same level as the first one. But a few films are. First Candyman is wonderful. It's held up so well over time. It's such a good film. So it's hard to actually compete with the first one because it's such a good film. So that's the problem the new Candyman has. It's good, but it's not the greatness of the first one. Now we're going to 30 Days of Night, which is a film made in the 2000s that came out, did well, produced by Sam Raimi and his company, and then disappeared. It was like there for a couple of weeks and then disappeared. But we talked to people, you see now, oh yeah, it's really good, isn't it? It's that film that never made a bigger splash as you thought it should have done, but it's found its life later. It did well enough in the release, but it's found its actual fans later as people are seeing it, you know, in home video with lights out and stuff like that, on streaming. You know, it's found what it is. And it is a terrific film. I mean, I watched it projected for this video, and it looks great projected. And the atmosphere is just wonderful. So that's probably the best way to see it. I mean, seeing a bigger screen is the best way to see it because it actually uses this. It learned a lot from John Carpenter's The Thing, like using snow and isolated locations for horror is great. I mean, this is so indebted to The Thing, but also it's its own identity. You know, but it isn't scared to be dark, to be really dark in lots of places. I mean, I'm not going to go into like the ending or anything, but it does have a satisfyingly like 70s ending. There's like not everybody gets out unscathed. It's pretty much we're doing a 70s horror film, but vampires in Antarctica, I think it is. It's one of the icy places that's hardly any night, hardly any daylight. So basically, it's set in a place where you can't. When night comes, it lasts for 30 days because of where it is. It's the isolation. The sun's on the other side of the planet. You can't get any light. So for 30 days, there's no light. So you're there, and you just have to survive in the cold for 30 days. For me, that would be fine because I'm not that bothered about sunlight that much. I'm a movie fan. It gets in the way. But for a lot of people, they can't take it. So a lot of people leave the location for 30 days and just say, look, we'll come back after the 30 days. We just can't take this darkness. But so a lot of people stay, and while they're staying there, vampires attack. Vampires just come. And they're led by Danny Houston, and this weird sort of guttural, language to themselves. They behave like animals, ultimately. Like they've devolved into their own tribe of species, and they go in, they destroy a place, and then they hide all the evidence, so you don't know what happened, because they don't want anyone to know vampires actually exist. They want it to be a subculture. They know basically if people know they exist, they will hunt it down. So try and avoid that. And in this case, they attack this town. Ultimately, some of the survivors are more stubborn about surviving than most places they've been to. And it's led by Josh Hartnett, and he's like the sheriff of the town, and he's dealing with his wife, Melissa George, who they're getting divorced. Even though it's sort of like their best, they're getting divorced, but obviously they still care about each other. And there's that kind of relationship continues throughout the film as both of them are stuck there and they're trying to survive the vampires. And it's a slow drip of vampires. The vampires just don't attack. It's a slow drip, and they have to hide in these houses for these 30 days and be silent as much as possible so the vampires don't hear them. And it's a slow moving suspense for 30 days. As things go wrong, slowly but surely, as people are taken out one by one, it just becomes a slow moving threat throughout the film as it gets bleaker and bleaker. And that's what's enjoyable about the film, is a sense of bleakness, a sense of there's not many people going to make it here in this film. You just know it in your bones as you're watching it. It's like we're actually going to get knocked down to very few survivors here. And a lot of Tim films do that, but the tone's always wrong, so you don't really feel the tragedy of it because you don't like the characters and it's a cartoon. This one makes you like the characters for the first 20 minutes. It's all the character stuff. So even the characters disappear and turn up later on, you know who they are. And then you watch them through these difficult situations. You get to like them a lot more. So when someone dies, it actually has an impact. And all the characters are defined well enough. Even though they're not going to get their life story, you get enough about who they are and what their tics are that it becomes important that they survive. So it is a really terrific film. I mean, I don't want to go any further than just say the acting's terrific. They all know what they're doing. They know they're in a genre film, but they're making everything realistic as possible. Like, everyone's in the same movie. The directors have worked out the tone of the film and who they are and what they are. So all the actors know what they're doing. Everyone feels it in the same film. And the tones match the acting. So because it's this based on this little B movie that's done extremely well, and it knows exactly what it is. So either you're going to like it or you're not, but it's going to be what it is. And that's the joy of the film. Now we're going to end the Halloween Western world cinema thing with two Tim Burton films. because I thought we've started off kind of a bit more serious, so let's go to Tim Burton and some of his sillier films. So we're going to look at Beetlejuice and Dark Shadows, an example of Tim Burton doing comedy, one viewed as a classic and one viewed as a disaster. And they are different films. Like, Dark Shadows is definitely a weirder film. It's definitely more alienating to people. Beetlejuice is, is justifiably viewed as a classic. It is really funny. It has a very good premise of two people, this happily married couple, suddenly die, and they're in their house. There's still always ghosts in their house when these new people move in and they don't like them very much, and they're trying to scare them out of the house. Beetlejuice gets involved, and Beetlejuice is a bioexorcist, this kind of ghoul that floats around and influences things in a bad way just to suit himself. And all hell breaks loose. So they take this really interesting idea and they give it to Tim Burton and let him really visualise the way out of it. And then they give the Beetlejuice character to Michael Keaton, who's a ball of energy. So this is the first of their current collaborations where they found a shared sense of weirdness. Like, Tim Burton brought out this kind of weirdness to Michael Keaton that other directors don't get to. And with Keaton as almost the centre of the film, Keaton's always the centre of the Tim Burton films he's in, really, ultimately. He always kind of drives the film. In the Batman films, he's kind of the depressed centre of those films, even though there's villains around. In this one, even though he's not the person carrying the story, you're always waiting for him to turn up. The leads are Alec Baldwin and Gina Davis, and they're both good. Like, Davis is better because she's got natural weird energy. Baldwin looks a bit more uncomfortable because he's playing this straight-laced guy, and I don't think it's an entirely perfect match, but he does a good job of it, though. It's just, I think he's an actor who's not particularly comfortable with this part, but he's still doing his best. But they're the straight-laced characters. They have to be the straight-laced characters. They have to be genuine so that everyone else bounces. They're the straight men of the film. Everyone else bounces off them. The new people come into the house are all weird. Jeffrey Jones is the guy who comes in. He's a weird guy who's a nervous breakdown. Catherine O'Hara is his wife, who's this pretentious artist who is insane. Everyone knows she's nuts, but she demands attention wherever she is. Winona Ryder's a daughter, who's a goth and who's very depressed about the world. And it's just this weird set of characters that can play off the ghosts without realising they're ghosts until Beetlejuice arrives and basically causes hell for them. And because it's all these art world people coming into this world, and Beetlejuice just being a total sicko, everything gets twisted into his way of seeing things. These odd art exhibits become monsters and everything else. It's just insane. But there's a through plot, which is what Tim Burton films sometimes lack. There is a plot. It's a weird plot, but it's a plot. There's a story. It's like them learning to live together. That's the story. And learn to get rid of Beetlejuice. That's the basic story. But it gives them a lot of leeway to go crazy. It gives Michael Keaton a lot of leeway to do crazy stuff as Beetlejuice. Anytime he's on the screen, he's just chewing the scenery left, right, centre. He's just like this ball of energy throughout the film. But he's not actually in it that much. He's a title character, and he appears perfectly placed moments until the end where he dominates. But it's a star part, but it's also like Dracula, where Christopher Lee's Dracula is not in the film that often, and then it was Dracula films. Beetlejuice is the same. He's a monster that they have to deal with. But he's a funny monster. But it's still structured that way. It's almost like a Dracula film. But it really works because it's as a ghost story with a supernatural villain who's funny. And it's just really enjoyable. It's really inventive. It's an explosion of people getting to do weird stuff and getting to do what they want. Because there's just a bunch of interesting actors who are allowed to be strange in this film. But the plot gives them a direction. And Tim Burton has a plot that gives him direction, so there's always a point to the scene, so it's not just weird imagery that sometimes happens in later films. Where you're feeling there's he knows there's not much plot here, he has to find something to keep people interested. But you see something Alice in Wonderland, there's so much times where he's trying to deal with a plot that's not moving at all, and he has to throw stuff in and hope for the best. Or he's got a plot that's moving in stupid directions, so he has to visualise it as best he can. But here he's got a good plot that he can connect with, and he's great. This one. Everyone's great. It's just one of those films where everything came together. It's one of those. It's almost like a fluke, but a lot of times people got together and they're a perfect match. But it's not something you can repeat. But I think that's why there's not been a sequel. Because it's a very unrepeatable phenomena. Now we have Dark Shadows, which is an example of a non-repeatable thing, really. Well, everyone thought it's going to be like Beetlejuice. Because Tim Burton doing a comedy, he hasn't done one of these for ages. It's going to be another Beetlejuice. He's going to do that kind of thing. And it came out and it was this depressed film that's kind of interesting in how weird it is. And there's a lot of asides, but it's nothing like Beetlejuice. I mean, this one is very episodic. Like, one thing happens, another thing happens, another thing happens. It's based on an old soap opera gothic thing that happened in the 70s where it's about vampires and werewolves and ghosts all in this house in a place called Collinwood, and it's... I think that was the name of it. And there's all these weird things happening, but it's like a soap opera plot. There's a witch and everything else. But it's done as if it's a soap opera. And Tim Burton has that structure of it in the film, which I think really sucks the energy out of it for people viewing it, wanting a good narrative. Because it's not that. It's like it avoids paying anything off. It has fun with the idea of like things don't pay off. It's unsatisfying the way Beetlejuice was satisfying. Beetlejuice is a plot. Going forward, this one has meandering side plots all over the place. And it's like what happened in Tim Burton does not have a strong writer. That's the problem with Tim Burton. He's had bland writers sometimes. A lot of times in his later films, he was much better with people like the guy who wrote Beetlejuice, Michael Dill, or Paul Rubens who did Pee Wee Herman, or Daniel Waters who did Batman Returns, or the guys who did Ed Wood, where they were strange writers. Like, he was getting strange writers, and between them they could make something that worked. I mean, the woman who wrote Edward Scissorhands took his idea and made sense of it, which understood the weirdness of it. So he was working with writers in the 90s where they understood they're doing weird stuff, and they had to kind of have some sort of direction to it, and it was a really good symbiosis with them. After that, he seemed to work with writers who were more traditional, and it's almost like we have to make him more normal. It doesn't work. And this one, it's almost like they're trying to make him have, like, you know, a kind of plot that would be a normal plot, like all these different interactions. But it's done as if it's very soap opera at the same time, and it's very formless. And it's just an example of where Tim Burton's gone as director, where a lot of time he's working these plots that don't seem to have much drive to them. I mean, there's still films he's made recently I've liked. I mean, I liked the one with the Miss Peregrine one, which was a bit more throwback to his older films. It wasn't as good as some of his older films, but it had a kind of beginning, middle, and end, you know. And I like Dark Shadows, even though it's a mess. It's a real mess. It works because of the actors having fun with the parts. The actors are camping up. Michelle Pfeiffer's in it, who's Catwoman for him. Johnny Depp is the lead vampire who's coming back after 200 years, and he's dealing with the modern world, and it takes a while to work it all out. And there's some obvious jokes about the modern world of a guy who's been away for 200 years. Some real groaners, which I think they knew were groaners. They were having fun with the fact they were groaners. But he's still doing this as a very kind of over the top but subtle at the same time performance. It's very much based on the Hammer thing. And Christopher Lee shows up at one point, and Eva Green's a villainess, and Chloe Moretz is the sullen teenager. Helen Bonham Carter is a drunken psychiatrist. There's lots of good actors doing good stuff. And individually all the stuff works. Everyone's doing the thing. And it's all kind of nice scenes. But the overall thing is just this mess because they don't have a weird writer in the middle of it actually making sense of it all to make it like, this has to go from here to here to here to keep you interested. which it doesn't have. There's a guy who did Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter, and it's just meanders everywhere. And it's like, if the plot, they need something, some drive to it to actually make it work. Even though the work tree is the super idea, the writing isn't strong enough to actually get it from place to place. That's the problem with the film. And I think that's the reason why it's not well liked, is because I think people see that there's some fun little performances in it, but there's no real drive to anywhere. It's just like it's floating. And it's interesting to watch it float, because I quite like the film. But I know why people don't like it. I mean, I really know why people don't like it. Because it really needed that drive. I mean, I think Burton needs to go back to like writers like Daniel Waters or Edward Guys or something, and with writers who understand his weirdness and can enjoy him with an interesting way, rather than just do this kind of thing that is a bit more traditional and makes Hollywood happy because they're not scared with him anymore. But it means the films are just stuff like Alice in Wonderland, where you're like, what am I watching? It looks pretty, but there's no internal drive to it. You know, that's the thing. He needs, because he's so visually good, he needs writers to push him. And he's not getting that anymore. He's getting writers who are more Hollywoodized, and it's not working as well. Maybe look at the Willy Wonka thing he did. It was like tons of scenes come from all over the place. Like, so there was no one who said, okay, we need to actually have a tone that actually works for everybody that floats through the film. It's just like, this tone comes from here, this bit comes from here, this bit comes from here. We've one trace all these things, but no one put it together to say, okay, we need to lose a few things here, or we need to adjust things to make it work. And Burton didn't do that, and so you got a film that meandered through these peaks and troughs throughout, and it's like, you leave thinking it's kind of unsatisfying. Even though there's nice bits in it, it's still kind of unsatisfying because it didn't kind of join together. And I think a lot of the recent Burton things that have been better, like Frankenweenie, are based on some of his old ideas. Or the animation thing he did with Depp, the stop motion thing, that was some of his best stuff. And again, it's like, he's working with people who get his weird style. And I think it's been kind of lost by dealing with Hollywood. So, that's a shame. So that's my 4 horror films to start the month of October. They're all worth seeing for different reasons. Obviously, I think 30 Days a Night is the strongest of them all, and Beetlejuice. Candyman's very good. Dark Shadows is the weakest. But if you've got a few beers, you might still want to watch it because it's fun. There's a lot of fun, but it's very flawed. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll be back soon with another one. Right, bye for now.